All right, we're recording. 3, 2. All right, we are back to hit on some week one lines. I'm Charles, joined by Andrew, and so yeah, we're gonna get into week one here. I think typically we don't really probably bet more than 5 or 6 games a week. It really depends, but we try not to get overzealous. We're not one of those people that's gonna like give you like 12 games. It's I think part of it is being disciplined and selective in what you bet. In week one too, it's you don't really have as good of a sample size, so there is a bit of a shot in the dark. And we found that probably weeks 2 through 5 are typically the best. We still have a couple ones we like. So and the games are all kind of spread out. With it being the first week, the games are kind of spread out really from Thursday to Monday. So it's a pretty long weekend in terms of college football exposure. So probably the first one, we can get into. Um, we actually put this in July. The Rocky Mountain Showdown, Colorado against Colorado State. Um, we took Colorado minus 11. New coach Mel Tucker against Bobo, the former Georgia offensive coordinator, who is probably a little in battle at this point at Colorado State. Um, Andrew, what are your thoughts on that one? The line has moved in Colorado's favor since we bet it. And like I said, I think we bet this the last 2 years. But what are your thoughts on this one, and kind of what's the rationale behind us taking it?
Yeah, so this is kind of a rerun of last year. We bet this last year, and it was it hit in epic fashion. I think it was
It's
like set.
45-13 was the
Yeah,
final.
I think we took the spread. It was like 7 points or something last year. Six. Anyways, so it's like 13 and a half or something right now. I mean, here's the deal with this. I mean, you've got I kind of know what Colorado is probably going to look like on offense. I think they'll be pretty good. Montez is back. Chenault's back. He's a monster playmaker.
Yeah, Laviska Shenault healthy is pretty significant. Like that's the thing too. Like we didn't know he was gonna. We took this game the last 2 years, and we took it like I guess last year. We didn't know with it being week one. We
I didn't
didn't
even know who he
we
was.
didn't we, we didn't even know he's gonna be like that. So I think that kind of amplifies this even more a little bit.
I think Colorado's defense is probably going to be
I
better.
think they should be better.
Uh,
Yeah, I agree.
and then you look at Colorado State. I mean, it was a absolute one man band last year with Preston Williams. He was. If you watch those games, it's not surprising that he's like doing pretty well right now. It's an undrafted free agent.
Dolphins, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that was like their only glimmer of hope on offense
Yeah, he
last
kept them in. Preston Williams, he was the five-star transfer from Tennessee. He looked like you dropped a 5-star in the Mountain West. He's completely unguardable. I think comparing him to Michael Gallup, who was, I think a third-round pick for them with the Cowboys the year before. And this is I think Michael Gallup was at Colorado State for 2 years. Preston Williams was only there for 1 year. So Preston Williams' junior year at Colorado State was better than Michael Gallup's. I think he maybe had like 1,500 yards receiving or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I first got on Bobo. Like Mike Bobo is. We were pretty surprised. We thought he was going to get fired. I mean, he was like limping around out there and looked like he had just pretty much kind of turned it in. And somehow they kept him. I don't really know exactly why or whatever, but I mean, this thing started taking a turn for the worse the year before. They had a pretty loaded roster 2 years ago and completely underperformed, blew big games, and ended up winning like 7 games or something. And that's kind of where we actually bet on them a few times and got burned. And I was like, okay, Bobo doesn't really. It appears
Kind of conservative and
yeah, he would get real conservative and stuff. And then last year, when this game came up, we bet on it, and then it just kind of opened our eyes. I mean, I don't think they're hitting on much. Um, I think Colin Hill's going to start for them. I've seen him enough to know that he's not any real huge threat or anything.
yeah, like 7 touchdowns, 7 picks. They had Carter Samuels, who started last year, the Washington transfer, and kind of pulled him late for Colin Hill, and Colin Hill performed worse.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Hill was worse than him.
He was worse than Carter
I mean,
Samuels.
not only that is I don't know who he's going to throw to because Preston Williams
And they had the Olabisi Johnson, who was really like he got drafted a really good receiver from the Mountain West too. So
Mm.
I'm not really sure what the offense is going
I
to
don't
come
know
up
how
with.
they're planning on scoring really many points at all. They'll probably turn the ball over 2 or 3 times. I mean, this thing is like a rivalry. I think Colorado probably takes it pretty seriously. So I don't. It's. I think it'll be similar to last year. I think Colorado will probably score 38-40 in that range, and Colorado State. I mean, it's going to be like 38-10 or
Yeah,
something. I
so
mean,
you're getting pretty good value on like a under 2 touchdown game, and yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a good point on Colorado's going to score with Chenault and Montez. I mean, those guys are pretty much veterans at this point, but when you're talking about Colorado's defense, I think Mel Tucker is going to be an upgrade defensively from a coaching standpoint, and then you factor in they have several very good defensive players like Mustafa Johnson. Davion Taylor is a freakish, a fast linebacker who was a JUCO guy. So is Mustafa Johnson. I think they have like a very fast and attacking defense, especially so when you pair them up against a Group of Five team. I have a very very hard time with a 4 quarter game seeing Colorado State matching with 4 score.
yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah, so that's one. That's one we like. That's the first one. Also on Friday night, keeping it out there, kind of on West Coast time. Yeah, Purdue is traveling to Reno to play Nevada. This is kind of an interesting one. I know you mentioned in the last episode we did that we like Jeff Brom a lot. Obviously he probably for the casual fan, they're going to notice that he, beat Ohio State. That kind of showcase game last year. Purdue's had a pretty tough schedule, and I think he's done pretty well there considering, the kind of talent. I think people forget before he got there, like Purdue was winning 2 and 3 games a year. So for them to like make bowl games is a pretty significant, you know, achievement. And then of course, like he's recruiting well, and they have Rondale Moore coming back.
Right.
Probably maybe the most dangerous player in college football. So yeah, so we got this one. I think did we get it at like 9.5? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a 9.5. It's at like 11 or something right now. I mean, here's the deal. I mean, Jeff Brom's probably our favorite coach. Yeah, he's arguably my favorite coach, but we kind of got on him when he was at Western Kentucky, and he was blowing people out. I mean, it was he had better players, it was better coaching. I mean, the teams they were playing, they could not hang with them, and to do that at a place like Western Kentucky is like crazy impressive because their history is not real great, especially at the FBS level. But you've got Purdue. This is the best roster he's probably had in terms of overall talent. I mean, they're getting progressively better. Um, the game's at Nevada, which I mean that's obviously not a plus, but it's the first game of the season, so
I
you're
mean,
not
that's really how that's how you kind of that's probably why I'm
right.
open to under 10 points.
Yeah,
Honestly, it's at
I mean,
Nevada.
there's no doubt about that. And then Nevada's got is I mean they've had this quarterback injury bug bite in the preseason, so they're what's the guy who the
Okay,
guy
so
yeah,
I think Christian Solano was supposed to start or was kind of dubbed the starter. People thought he was going to start, and then he got hurt. And then it was whittled down to Malik Henry of Last Chance U fame, the Florida State transfer, and Carson Strong, I think he was like a redshirt freshman. Malik Henry pulled his hamstring. It sounds like he is ready to go in the game, but the missed practice time put him behind the 8 ball. So they're going to start Carson Strong. So
so I mean,
either way, I'm neither of those guys would really scare me. I think if you're betting on Purdue, you probably would prefer Carson Strong as your first time start. He probably doesn't have the upside in terms
I
of
mean,
plays. Henry.
I think Nevada will just get there and try to dink and dunk. I mean,
Yeah, they run their offensive coordinator is Matt Mummy, Hal
yeah.
Mummy's son. So
So
they're gonna run a pure air raid where they just throw the ball.
they're just going to dink and dunk, and I don't. I mean, they'll probably score a little bit, but I don't know. I think Purdue with Brom third year with the players they have, Rondale Moore. I mean, I think they'll score a bunch of points on these guys. I mean, they've got better talent than them across the board, and there's obviously, in my opinion, I mean, I think Jeff Brom's, he's a top coach of anywhere. So I mean, it's too good. I mean, we got it at 9.5. So I mean, that's pretty good. It's only a little bit more than a touchdown. I think they'll win by by probably 3 touchdowns or something. And I don't see how it's really that close.
Yeah, Purdue's a tough schedule. They really kind of have to win this game, and when you kind of look at the way their schedule sets up, they have Vanderbilt and TCU in non-con.
And this too, Brom is good. He's better with more time. He's one of those guys. So like, you see him in these type of games and stuff. Like, there's no telling what he's come up with. He's extremely innovative from an offensive perspective.
Yeah,
and
they'll probably run a bunch of trick plays.
Oh, they'll absolutely run a bunch of trick plays. He's probably changed a bunch of stuff, and so you have a slight unknown factor with him, and it generally turns out in their favor with the teams he's coached. I mean, they pretty much always, he's he's offensive guru. So
yeah, okay. All right, so next one, I guess we're kind of on weather watch for this one. Florida State -4.5 against Boise State. That's in Jacksonville, obviously. As of Thursday, we have tropical storm Hurricane Dorian is in the Caribbean, and they are kind of monitoring that. Obviously, it's I think there's like a state of emergency in Florida, so we'll see if that affects the game at all. We're just gonna assume it doesn't. I mean, it kind of sucks. A lot of times, if you have any kind of plays or bets on Florida teams like this time of year, weather tends to affect it during hurricane season. So we'll see what happens with that. But 4.5, I think we like that a decent amount. It looks like Boise State's going to start a true freshman quarterback, Hank Bachmeier. I think when you're looking at Boise State in the last couple of years, I think they got beat pretty handily by Oklahoma State last year when they kind of came over. That was week 3, but that's probably a more analogous kind of comp for this game. Oklahoma State beat them 44-21 at Oklahoma State last year. And then I think we've hit on Florida State a little bit, but we can kind of rehash this. I think definitely this is kind of a buy low scenario with Florida State.
Yeah. So I mean, here's kind of the way I see this. I think Boise's going to be pretty good. They'll probably win 9 or 10 games in the Mountain West. I mean, they do it every year, but Florida State's got better players than them. They're starting a freshman quarterback.
Boise State also lost all their other skill players too, like Alexander Madison, their top 2 receivers.
So I mean, it's you've got Florida State. I mean, I don't even know if anybody on their staff has never seen this offense before. So I mean, you have that. I mean, from experience watching this stuff enough, I mean, if they come out and they don't know how to stop it, I mean, they'll get 60 dropped on them because it's one of those deals. Either like you can kind of semi-stop it or you can't. And I mean, it happens all the time when these Browns offenses, and they historically come out guns blazing, at the beginning of the year. And I mean, that whole Florida State crowd, Kendall Briles, Willie Taggart, they got major chips on their shoulder. And I mean, they will stomp on the gas.
One thing that's good for betting on them is they will not really pull players. They'll run the score up, which I think if you're betting is something you have. You can kind of get into the morality of it, but I think when you have money on the game, you want to be betting on a coach who is inclined to run the score up.
Yeah, all these guys they've got a pretty big group of haters right now. So I mean, I've seen Willie Taggart. I mean, we had him at USF one time, and they scored 21 points last 4 minutes of the game to cover. So I mean, like he just doesn't care. Yeah. And Boise's, I think they're good. I think they're formidable, but I don't see they're not going to match up with them.
I think for Florida State to not cover and lose this game, it's going to be a situation where they come out and just shoot, like, implode. They just shoot themselves in the foot. And they can't.
Their O-line looks like they did last year.
Yeah, so stuff like that. I think it'll be unforced errors for them to come out and lose. But like Boise, Boise lost a lot of key players. Like that's just. I mean, I think the average fan will be sitting there like Boise's always tough. Like you kind of think of them like upsetting teams, and it's not a question. We're talking about the line is under a touchdown, but playing in Florida, flying across the country, this isn't probably as experienced or as loaded a Boise team as we've seen in the past, or kind of what most people would think of when they think of Boise. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good number there. And also too, we were looking at the team totals. I think the team total for Florida State was 28 points. That seems very low. I went back and looked. The last time a Kendall Briles offense has not scored 30 points was the second week of 2017 when he was at FAU and they played Wisconsin. And that was obviously a Power 5 team, and that was really before the offense kind of took off at FAU. So,
I mean, Boise has good coaches and whatnot, but I mean, Florida State I think has better with Kendall Briles and Randy Clements and those guys. I mean,
Boise State also lost their defensive coordinator. Their defensive coordinator Andy Avalos was hired by Oregon, so you're gonna have some turnover there. They hired a guy from Eastern Washington. I'm sure he's pretty good. Eastern Washington's a good FCS team, but I mean, we're talking like this is the big leagues here, so it's going to be a step up. Not only to FBS, it's going to be a step up.
I mean, this is the hardest. This is probably the hardest offense to figure out. I mean, there's people that coach offense with these guys, and they don't even know how to run it. So
also too, no one really knows how Florida State is going to use their personnel. So you haven't seen this. You have not only have you not seen a ton of offense, you haven't seen the offense at Florida State. So there's a lot of unknowns from a game planning perspective. So they could kind of come out and have to make a lot of in-game adjustments depending on what.
I don't know really how this is going to go. I mean, they could win by they could lose, but I mean, they could win by 7 points, or it could be a complete blowout. I mean, that's entirely possible.
It's really true too, and the thing is too, if you want to make any plays on Florida State, you probably need to do it pretty early, because if they get it rolling, the value's going to evaporate. So, if you are in a lot of sharps, people are kind of on Florida State this year. They're kind of a trendy pick with the people that kind of know what they're doing and following this. So it's probably a lot of that too, kind of fading the public and how people are kind of just piling on the media, just the national media, just like fans are piling on Florida State. So if you kind of want to go against the grain, this would probably be your best opportunity, because if they come out and blow out Boise State, you might not have a really good chance of betting on them the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so our last one is that of games that we have bet already. Ohio State, FAU. I think we got on this one in June.
It's the first one. It's the first one.
So Ohio State is playing FAU. I think we got it at 26.5. What is it right now? Part of the reason why we took this video for Ohio State fans to bet it up.
I think it's 27.5 or 28, somewhere around there.
It's gone up a little bit. Obviously Ohio State, it's I guess the first official game of the Ryan Day era. You have Justin Fields as the starter. FAU with Lane Kiffin's back. FAU was a pretty big disappointment last year. I think when you kind of look at their team, they obviously lost Kendall Briles and traded him out for Charlie Weiss Jr., who's 25. I know he has a photographic memory apparently, but I mean, I'm not sure how far that gets you when you're calling plays. Yeah, I mean, I think FAU is. You're talking about there was kind of a joke, Urban Meyer. Now, granted, this is Urban Meyer, so it's maybe a little different coaching tendency, but Ohio State under Urban Meyer in their non-conference games, that was almost a complete lock bet. They would blow people out. I remember that one game where they played Tulsa a couple years ago where they won they dropped 70 points on Tulsa. They really don't let up. So I think there's a lot to feel good about there. I think Ohio State come out and just run the ball with Fields and J.K. Dobbins. There's a lot of opportunities there to come back up some yards. They have good players coming back always. Ohio State's one of the top probably 2 or 3 teams talent-wise in the country. So I think that should be. You're talking 4 touchdown game. Obviously, that's a pretty high bar, but you don't really shy away from those stat lines all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with this is last year when FAU went and everybody was betting on them against Oklahoma. And they lost by 40 or 50 points, whatever it was. I mean, they got smoked. So, I mean, you don't really want to draw those type of comparisons because it's a different year, different team, whatever. But Florida Atlantic, I mean, I'm pretty cold on Lane Kiffin. I mean, I think he's overrated. I don't think he's terrible, but he's mediocre at best. And I mean, I don't think he's some wizard to where he's gonna pull something out of a hat here. I mean, Ohio State has got significantly better players. I think they have better coaches. It's at Ohio State. It's the first game of Ryan Day era. Nobody really knows how good he is. I mean, you hear Urban Meyer and those type of people say how good he is, but I mean,
he had the first 4 games last year.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of a wait and see type deal with him of really what he ends up to be. I mean, all signs point to he's probably pretty good, but I can't really say that. But Fields is nasty. So I mean, he should throw and run all over these guys. I mean, FAU's defense should not be able to stop them, to any degree. So, I mean, this should be a pretty easy win.
Yeah,
I mean, 28 points in that much when Ohio State should score between 50 and 60. I mean,
yeah. So FAU too. They initially had a transfer from DeAndre Francois, and I think that got nixed.
Yeah.
And he's at like Hampton or something now. Then the other quarterbacks, Chris Robinson, who was a transfer from Oklahoma, and there was like a bunch of stuff that came out like yesterday or the day before, on like a bunch of sexual assault stuff. So no one really knows what's going on there. So that's kind of a deal where you aren't really sure necessarily what you're getting from them. They kind of get these transfer guys like B.J. Emmons is a transfer from Alabama running back, but I just think from a talent perspective, this is a very wide gap. Ohio State likes to run score in these kind of games.
And this too, like Florida Atlantic runs a scheme that is prone to them getting blown out. Like they're not going to get out there and sit on the ball. So, I mean, they're probably going to go 3 and out a bunch real quick. They'll be off the field. They're not deep, and it's kind of got like 56 to 20 type deal.
All right, so
written all over it.
Here are like some non-con openers from Florida State the last couple of years. They're just really non-con openers. Oregon State last year they beat 77-31. They played Army in 2017, 38-7. UNLV 48-21. Bowling Green in 2016, 77-10. Tulsa in 2016, 48-3.
Yeah, it's going to be something like that, I think.
Hawaii in 2015, 38-0. Mm-hmm. So they're going to score a lot of points. And I think you're just going to outpace them. So 4 touchdowns really isn't too much. And like you said with FAU, I mean, they haven't had a similar – I don't really like talking about spots necessarily, but they had a similar spot against OU last year.
I mean, dude, everybody was betting on them last year.
63-14.
Yeah, I mean, they got it was it was over before it started.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think FAU they get like Glenn Spencer, who was the former DC at Oklahoma State. He was at Charlotte last year. He's pretty solid, but yeah, they're gonna be outmanned for sure. Okay, so those are all the sides. There's a couple more that we're kind of looking at. I guess like Oklahoma State, Oregon State. Oklahoma State is traveling to Corvallis.
Yeah, I mean, it's 14. I don't understand. I don't know if people are betting on Oregon State or what's really going on with this, but this is either like Oklahoma State or don't bet it. I mean, I don't see how that's even possible.
Yeah, no one in their right mind with that.
I mean, Oklahoma State is very capable of beating them badly. I mean, it could be bad. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure Oregon State is starting the same guy they started last year.
He's Jake Luton. He was
and I think they're like okay. Like I think all these guys are like whatever. But I mean their defense is bad. Their defense was really bad last year, and that's not a good matchup against Oklahoma State. New offensive coordinator. I guess they've been watching Princeton tape. So do they really know what's going to happen? No, not really. So I mean. It's kind of a bad recipe. I mean, I don't know if I'll end up taking it or not. I just don't know that much about Oregon State. They're kind of out of our rim. I don't think I've ever bet on them.
I don't think so either.
So I mean, they're just kind of notorious losers. I don't think they like really lose by great margins all that much. Like they kind of just scrape by in these Pac-12 games.
They lost. They
lost
a
but
lot of Pac-12 games by big margins last year.
Yeah, I mean, dude, their defense last year was one of the worst in the country.
It was the second worst in the country after UConn, and UConn had the worst defense in
college
football history.
You tell me that's a good recipe against Oklahoma State.
Oregon State gave up 7.4 yards per play last year, and they were second worst scoring defense last year, and they were third worst in 2017.
So yeah,
they're returning 9 starters, but what does that matter? Your defense was
horrific. See, in these scenarios, returning starters on a team that people is bad is actually. I mean, that's actually that's not a good thing because the players are clearly bad. I mean, how much better have they really gotten?
Yeah,
I mean,
coaches.
I mean, if they had all new starters, now I'd be more hesitant to bet it because there's those guys could be better than the previous dudes.
My pause with this game would be Oklahoma State is saying that they're going to play 2 quarterbacks. Maybe that's a sign that Mike Gundy doesn't feel super pressured. To go with one guy in this game. He feels like he's almost treating it like they're playing like a group of 5 or a FCS team. You could look at it that way. But I would feel better about the game if I knew that Spencer Sanders was going to take the majority of the snaps. So, but if it's 14, that's pretty good value. I mean, I would seriously consider.
Yeah. We might end up doing something with that.
Okay. Well, another interesting one is Notre Dame Louisville. I think that was maybe around 20 points. What is it now?
It's like 8. Down? It's 18. Last I checked. I mean, here Louisville was. I mean, off the top of my head, from a effort perspective, was probably the worst I'd ever seen last year.
I mean, I think they were the worst team against the spread.
Yeah, they were 1-11 or something against the spread. I mean, their effort last year. I mean, they had completely given up. We bet on them the last 4 or 5 weeks, and the games were never close. And the spreads ended up getting pretty big towards the end. I mean, it was,
they gave up at least 52 points the last 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the deal. I mean, you can sit here and say, oh, they're going to be trying or whatever, but that tells me they're probably not all that talented. And
they also had a pretty mass exodus to the portal. I think most of their top players are back, but I think they're very lacking in depth.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they had 20-something players in the portal at one point last year. So, I mean, here's the deal: Notre Dame is going to be pretty good. So, I mean, they could go in there. They're used to playing in big games. I think it's on Monday night. It's the only game. Yeah. So it'll probably be packed at Papa John. Is it still Papa John Stadium?
I think he's like persona non grata in Louisville. Right?
Yeah, so I don't even know what the name of it is. But anyways, they are it's a bad. I mean, I think Notre Dame could get out there and play pretty average football and beat them by 3 touchdowns. I mean, they're starting Jawan Pass. He didn't really do much for me last year. I mean, they yanked him and
I mean, he had 8 touchdowns and 12 picks.
Yeah, he's
percentage.
I mean, and that's under Bobby Petrino, who's a pretty good offensive coach. So I mean, I don't want to bet something off of last year, and that's the one thing that's kind of the hang up on this is you got to erase Louisville from last year because they're not going to be that bad.
You got to get that taste out of your mouth.
It's just impossible.
There's no way they'll be that bad again.
And it was awesome betting on them at the end because it was a guarantee. I mean, I think. Yeah, it was 4 or 5 games we bet on them. It was just laughable how bad they were.
Yeah, I mean, the Clemson one was 77-16.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they the players weren't even they were just
it was a full blown no moss situation.
Oh yeah, they just completely quit.
Yeah.
So I mean that won't be the case with a new coach and stuff, but I mean Notre Dame's a top 5 to top 10 team. They're coming to Louisville, and this is. If they jump on them early, they might just revert to old habits.
Well, if you look also too, I think the argument for Notre Dame's very solid across the board. I think when Notre Dame went undefeated in the regular season last year, they obviously can play week to week and show up for every game. I think when you look at when Ian Book took over the starting job, their scoring spiked significantly. I think they only scored maybe under 30 points twice after he took over.
They were much better with
I mean, you're talking about 56, 38, 45, 44. 42. So they were scoring a lot of points with him. And then I think Notre Dame has a very good pass rush coming back. They have a very good secondary with like this kind of like a really good safety duo with like Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott and Troy Pride.
I mean, this too, like, like I think Satterfield, the new Louisville coach, I think he's pretty good. But I mean,
it's not going to be like a deal where he comes out and runs a bunch of exotic stuff. Like,
no,
he plays pretty straight up.
Yeah, he plays very straight up. More of a, I mean, it's kind of more of a, you know, it's not a college up tempo like crazy offense that could be some equalizer here. I mean, he's got significantly worse players.
Like and when he was at App State, he had better players than everybody else. In the Sun
exactly.
Belt, and they would kind of run a kind of outside zone play action scheme, which you're going to run that to the teeth of Notre Dame's front.
Oh, if they do that, then they won't score anything at all.
With an outmatched offensive line and skill players, it's probably doesn't bode well.
Yeah, no, I think it's just a bad matchup. You know.
Yes, in terms of like.
I mean, Notre Dame could beat them. Yeah, it's stylistically, unless Satterfield gets up there and runs something different than he normally runs, then maybe. But it's a pretty bad matchup, and unless Jawan Pass has made some kind of drastic improvement from last year, I mean, you can't say he'll be anything better than I don't even want to call him average.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we probably hit on most of them. I guess pull up our percentages from last year. I guess we probably should have done it front, but just to establish the credibility, it's kind of a douchey move to be like, oh, if we hit like so and so percent, I know everybody. I kind of feel we can do that, but I mean, we're gonna give the picks probably to establish some credibility. I think you'll probably notice like we don't like bet on like a super ton of games. It's probably like 4. So there might be a game we just like any of them. But what were we last year?
On spreads, we were like I think we were 26. Let me look it up. Yeah, 26 and 14, 65%.
Yeah.
And then on totals, I don't think we took an actual total like a game total last year. I think they were all team totals, so just one side.
I don't really like game totals.
The deal with the team totals is we didn't do them until I think 2 years ago, and it basically we were betting totals, and one of the teams was kind of screwing us. So we decided, okay, well, the team total is actually better because you get one of the teams out that could kind of screw you on it. So we were 5.5 and we lost 0.5. We kind of bet like half units and whatnot on those. So overall, we were like, if you add it all up, of total units, it was like 68%. I mean, here's the thing: is like we normally do pretty good on these spreads and stuff. We got in trouble like 3 years ago betting like crazy stuff, like teasers, and that was like a year into this whole deal. We kind of like have zeroed in. We have like a threshold of what actually is bettable and what's not bettable.
Yeah, we have a pretty high.
Yeah, so I mean, and most of these games, like I mean, all the ones last year, like. The majority of the ones we win, like they're really not even close. A lot of them aren't close, and then
that's kind of the allure of betting favorites. Yeah. Like you're dealing with bigger margins,
right?
Especially if you can get one like this, like you feel like it's like a 3 or 4 touchdown game. You can get it like under 10.
Yeah,
that's great. And I mean, I think most of the underdogs we take are usually like for us to take an underdog, it's almost like we feel like the underdog is going to win straight up. It's like a wrong team is favored situation. And you probably maybe get more of those in like the bigger conference games. Like I think the classic game that we bet on was like in like 2016, the Alabama was an underdog at Georgia, and Georgia had played like a terrible South Carolina team. And I think Grayson Lambert like completed every pass or like set some kind of like completion record. And then Alabama played Georgia and
so
was up 20 points the first quarter.
I'm looking right here. And I have one underdog all year last year. We had one losing week of 15 that we actually legitimately lost money. The rest of them we either pushed. There was 2 we broke even on, and the rest of them we ended up winning something. We never bet more than 5 games was the most. This opening week is probably the best from a number standpoint, from a total amount. Last year we bet 4 games and went 3-1. I mean, like I think the totals this year aren't quite as juicy as before. Like we've had some home runs on the futures, win total future stuff. But the first week, there's like a lot of stuff that's kind of head scratching.
Yeah. Well, also too, it's like during the first week we try to just watch as many games as possible and collect as much info as possible because really, like the whole key with this is like you got to watch the games. Like you have to watch the games. If you're goofing around, like eating nachos all day, going out and cutting the grass and missing like a whole time slot, you're probably gonna make that up. And so like if you actually want to be serious about this, you have to watch all the games because you probably aren't gonna go back and watch them. And a lot of this stuff you have to take in context. Like see when they pull the quarterback, see if something happens because there's a lot of things you can pick up. You can only pick up on watching the game and not looking at a box score
Yeah.
or reading a recap. So my recommendation would be watch as many games as possible, and you kind of establish, some tendencies and teams you like, and like Andrew mentioned in the last one, there are certain teams you like that really like be to our advantage if they come out and like don't play well in the first game, and then we can kind of once they get to conference play, if they kind of get like a juicy non-con matchup, we can like hit them pretty
Yeah.
hard.
Well, I mean, here's what I do too: is I watch all the games we bet on, obviously, because we generally bet on. You end up betting on the team more than once. I mean, that's generally how it is. I mean, I don't know the actual percentage of it, but I'd say 50.
Unless somebody comes out and they just like stink or they don't look
Yeah.
like we expect them to look like we
Yeah,
typically
yeah, you typically bet on more than once. And then this too is like the other games I'll watch is I'll go. I look ahead and I'll go look at matchups that are juicy.
in like the next like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, and those will be the games I'll watch so I know that I know what I'm looking at. I mean, we have a pretty strict rule of I will not bet on something of somebody I've not watched. Now, obviously, week one you haven't watched them, but we're betting on teams that we're like actually familiar with, their coaches and stuff. And that's kind of like the hesitancy I said on like Oregon State is like, I mean, I've never really watched them play. So I mean, I've watched them maybe once or twice and have never bet on them. So it's like tough for me to be real confident on something like that.
Most people aren't gonna really be watching Oregon State. You're gonna have to go out of your way.
I mean, we like, I've watched probably every game Kendall Briles has coached the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So and Jeff Brom, we watched every single Jeff Brom game almost. So it's like we're pretty familiar with what these guys do and what they got. So I mean, it's you have to watch the stuff. I mean, we go off of talent and coaching and stuff that's actually like pretty concrete, not like some hooey of they're gonna.
Oh, like I like they're gonna be motivated. For this game.
That's
if you do that, you will 100% lose.
Yeah, I mean, at that point you're like a psychologist of like 18-year-old kids.
You're like basically pulling like a Miss Cleo.
Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Tarot cards.
Yeah, I mean, like saying somebody's going to show up and whatnot. I mean, you have no idea. So I mean, it's that's just crazy.
That's just
It's
just I don't know what else to say.
Exactly. So that's kind of what you get with this stuff. I mean, these guys. I mean, they just kind of go around and I've heard everything in the book of they're 100% going to show up and they always play big in this game and all this stuff.
I love it when some people pull back like decade-long stats like that matters. Like, oh, like the last like 20 years.
It's four coaches ago. What did the team do? I mean, that has nothing to do with now. I mean, this is a what have you done for me lately business. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's what'd you do? I mean, we're talking about last year on the first week, but next week we ain't talking about last year. We'll talk about last week. I mean, that's all that really matters. It's one of those deals you gotta. I mean, I'm not even a proponent of really giving out stuff because we've gotten in, telling people picks and all this stuff, and they get in. You give them one, it'll lose, and they'll complain or whatever. So it's just you got to kind of do the work yourself and make that judgment of what's bettable and what's not.
If you're gonna take anything from what we said, I mean, if you want to like tail us, like do so at your own risk. But I think the largest takeaway is to come up with the methodology with how you do it. I mean, there obviously are some I think kind of non-negotiable things you need to do, like watch all the games. It sounds simple, but most people that do this don't, and then kind of come up with a way of doing it, and then also too, I think it's a fun. If you don't really have a team, like we don't really have like teams, I don't have teams you root for. I think it's an interesting way to just look at the sport through that prism, and it kind of cuts through some of the BS when you're talking about like coaches and players. It's good, and it's also too like it gives you a reason to follow the Group of Five. Like there's a lot of coaches that will get hired, for Power 5 jobs, and we have been watching them for years. Whereas like maybe the average person, average fan doesn't know who they are, and we've kind of been watching them just from the gambling aspect. So it kind of makes you dive a little deeper on teams, and it's just I think with the legalization of it, it's only become more prominent. And I think if you are serious about it, there's a lot. I think it's I think you go into like stuff like this, not really expecting like make money on it, but it definitely doesn't hurt if you kind of have a hobby that can turn out being lucrative. And obviously, it can be like a little bit of an adrenaline rush too. Just from a gambling betting perspective. So.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but I
I agree.
guess that'll probably do it. Probably, I'm sure we'll have like a lot of thoughts next week, observations and whatnot. Probably some actionable stuff that we could probably parlay into plays in week 2, week 3. Like we said, I mean, like I said before, typically from our experience, the best weeks for getting this stuff is probably weeks 2 through 5, kind of when before all of the numbers can adjust to kind of what's showing up on the field. So that's kind of why week 1 is so important, week 2, week 3. So yeah, we'll do it next time. Thanks for listening.